Hello, everybody. We've got a show that promises to be at least mildly interesting for your listening and watching enjoyment. I'm your host, Jared Correia. I'm the CEO of Red Cave Law Firm Consulting. For the monologue, I'm talking about building professional development resources inside of law firms. In the interview, it's Melissa Rogozinski of RPC Strategies, LLC. For the counter program, we've got a new segment we're calling Autobiographical. Now, let's discuss the development of accessible training resources for lawyers in law firms. Yes, it can be a thing. Law firms probably universally, actually, don't spend enough time focused on professional development for attorneys, which is sort of a problem because that's like the whole thing. And especially younger lawyers really want access to continuing professional development, as they should, by the way. That means that if you, as a managing attorney, want to retain your attorney employees into the future, that you've got to spend more time focused on their professional development. And that means building a professional development program. This will also make it more likely that they become or stay good attorneys. Now, while that might sound like a massive project, it doesn't have to be all that daunting. There are, in fact, a number of things you can do with minimal effort to build a veritable professional development curriculum into your law firm to show others how to be lawyers, or quote unquote, the right kind of lawyers, which I hear a lot from law firms. That means that the lawyers in the practice want to show them how this firm practices versus some others attached to those particular values of the firm and case process that they like to deploy. First, you want to create a place where you can store your professional development materials of all stripes: text, audio, video, whatever else you got going on. The good news is that you likely already have a resource space in place. If you use Google Workspace for email, you can just create folders in Google Drive. And if you're a Microsoft 365 user, OneDrive should fit the bill. There are, of course, alternative document drive tools, as well as softwares purpose-built for resource hubs. But as a starting point, this is certainly sufficient, and it's the cheapest and easiest solution because you already probably have it in place already. Just create a separate professional development folder and subfolders as you go, and you're off to the races. You can always upgrade to something else later. Next, you can start your collection of professional development resources with those you already have in place, which are likely not yet organized. That's the unfortunate part. Do you have CLE materials from Bar Association events in electronic format? Upload those. How about paper-based CLE materials? Scan them and upload them too. Do you have access points for CLE or professional development subscriptions that you can share with your staff? If so, make those credentials available via the Secure Resources portal or through a shared password manager. This collection should also include internal firm materials like template documents and video-based explanations, draft workflows, and even more. You probably have more professional development resources than you think, just kicking around. So, it's a matter of sourcing it and organizing it for consumption. The trick is making that collection available in a meaningful way for your team, too. After that, once you've collated your resources in a consumable way, it's time to fill in the holes. There may be some things you want to add, and now it's your job to develop those items. Maybe you need additional explainer videos for substantive questions. Maybe it's missing administrative processes. Maybe it's templates that you haven't built yet. Some of this stuff will be missing for your initial collection. Some of it will come up in the course of doing business where you'll be talking to a mentee or an employee, and you'll see that you need some resources that you don't have already. Get a list together, the initial list, and as you go, and just pare it down bit by bit. In addition to accessible materials, the lawyers in your firm will also want to have consistent access to mentors, as I just alluded to. And those mentors will be able to provide feedback on what they're trying to do, what you're trying to do as a team. This can be accomplished through recurring meetings, including one-on-ones or as part of the case management process. This kind of feedback can also be offered in a group setting when case review meetings are accomplished, which can be done should be done on a regular basis, monthly at least, probably weekly or bi-weekly. That's more advisable. There are likely obvious candidates for mentor roles within your law firm. So this is largely about convincing your mentors of the value of their services and also scheduling that time with their mentees, which bookings should not be overridden. Of course, there will continue to be tons of external resources available for staff attorneys, and not just those you've already collected. So it makes sense to ensure that your attorney staff continue to have access to professional development resources. Not only those that are static, but those that you can collect and store at your firm on an ongoing basis. In part, that means ensuring that your staff has access to continuing education and professional development events on a recurring basis, so that they can add to the resource pool themselves. Understanding that these events will also include access to valuable networking components. Ensuring that your staff is able to engage ongoing professional development activities is just as important as ensuring that those same staff attorneys will have continuing access to materials generating from those past activities. I mean, I feel better about your in-firm educational component now. How about you? So get to work. Next up, we'll run through a round of This Is Your Life with Melissa Rogozinski of RPC Strategies, LLC. Melissa has led a really interesting life and has had a really interesting career in and out of the legal tech space, and we'll go through all of it, or most of it. That's next. Just a note for listeners before we begin our interview segment, this episode contains frank discussion of sexual abuse and trauma, which may be triggering for some. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast is presented for informational purposes only and does not substitute for professional mental health care or therapy. If you or someone you know has been or is being affected by sexual abuse, please reach out for support. Well, I've effectively run out of things to say now, which is awkward because this is a podcast. So I'm just going to go outside and drink from the hose. That's right. Don't judge me. Okay, maybe I'll do that later. Let's introduce our guest instead. We're glad to have her back for her second appearance on Legal Late Night. Only the second person who's done this twice, hopefully in advance of completing the hat trick, coming on a third time. That's right. Our guest today is Melissa Rogo, as her friends, neighbors call her, Rogozinski. She's the CEO of RPC Strategies, LLC. Rogo, welcome back.
Jared, I'm so happy to be here. I was thinking about that this morning and I was like, I've been on Jared's podcast so many times. I wonder if he's ranking his guests to who's been on mentally the most. I'm wondering if I'm in the top 10. I might be in the top 5.
Probably.
Yeah. No,
I like
great.
to give the people a variety.
I'm happy for you, and I'm really proud of you for this new show that you struck out on your own. I really like working with you and Evan. No, I love your show.
Thank you. Evan's great. Evan will not come on camera or speak on the episodes, really, but he does an excellent job behind the scenes. Makes me look good, which is hard to do.
Especially at 67, huh?
Yeah. 67 years young, as they say. Mm-hmm. That Social Security check hits like crack. Okay. Let's talk about... I want people that, like, if nobody's seen you on the show, give people a rundown of what you do. What is RPC Strategies? What do you do over there? And then we'll dive into your book.
Okay. So I've been in law since, 1994? So now we're 32 years. I was a litigation paralegal for 11, and then I went into sales for legal tech. I won't tell you what I was doing in 94 as a 67-year-old. But so then I went into legal tech sales, and I did that for about 7.5, 8 years. And a group that I started, some education I started when I was in sales, turned into my first business when my mom got sick. And then so for the last 14 years, I have been an entrepreneur in law and legal tech, doing continuing education on eDiscovery, data privacy, cybersecurity, growth marketing, sales consulting. And now I'm working with a edge data center startup, helping to operationalize
Hold on. I want to talk
vision.
about that in a second. Yeah, let's talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Because this was new to me. Mm-hmm. So you could have, like, to summarize, you could have just said, I've been living the dream. Because who doesn't want to get into legal tech and legal tech related consulting? everyone.
So no, I met these guys actually at the same time I was starting to write the book. I met them in the fall of 25, and after 2 or 3 years of kind of seeing what was going on in the law and legal tech with AI and all of this just insane amount of money that was being invested, I had pitched an idea to Steve Embry that this kind of looked like a house of cards in the middle of Pompeii to me. And I just told him, I was like, this isn't even a bubble. Like it's going to be a meltdown because the infrastructure and the power isn't there to support it. And so Steve and I started working on an article series together called Like Lawyers in Pompeii. And one idea turned into 6 articles. And at the same time,
was it actually called Lawyers in Pompeii?
Yeah, we called it Like Lawyers in Pompeii, and it was a 6-part series. So each one had its own title after that. Yeah, and
I love Pompeii. Really,
a lot of the things that we predicted came true and happened.
Sure.
And at the same time, I went to a local networking event, and I met these guys, a couple of co-founders. Now it's just one. We've done some restructuring, but they are building edge data centers. And I was like, well, what's that? And edge data centers are not these hyperscalers that want to take up all these swaths of land. They're creating all these issues of communities pushing back about the water and the power and all that. Billions of dollars that are being on a hold right now. But what they're doing is acquiring existing facilities that maybe have been abandoned or need to be upgraded. So they're already existing, the power's already there, and it needs to be upgraded for AI for 2030 and what have you. So
retrofitting data centers.
Right. So that's what they're doing now. And there's a couple of other business components to it as well. But I'm basically in a chief of staff role right now, helping to pull all the people together and helping to operationalize the vision and raise our first round of seed capital.
So how'd you get connected with these data center guys? That's super interesting.
Yeah, so I was attending a networking event here in Fort Lauderdale, and it was completely outside of law and legal tech. And the first day I just kind of listened to a lot of people, and it was a lot of crypto guys, and everybody was talking about AI. And there was some marketing and sales guy on stage that was annoying me because he was just one of these hardcore sales people from the stage. Yeah. But the second day, I wasn't planning to go back, but the host of the event invited me to the second day. And so it was a little bit more of an intimate group at one of the tiki bars here at the beach. So
very nice.
I got to have better conversations with some of the people I had seen and heard, and just more one-on-one. And just one thing led to another. And I ended up talking to this guy that had a partner, and they were talking about building edge data centers. And I was like, what's that? And then he explained the concept to me, and I was just like, the lights went off, and I was like, that's it. And this is going to sound weird, but only if you haven't read my book. There was this ethereal moment when I felt like I was in a bubble with this guy, and it was so profound. And I was like, this is where my career is going next. I felt it. I knew it. And I actually worked with these guys for 2 months without getting paid, just because I want to. Like, I've never done that before. And I feel so strongly about what they're doing. And I know it's the right path, because without the infrastructure and without the power, all of this development that we're doing in AI, it's going to melt down. And we're already starting to see signs of that. We can't support it yet. So we have to have this.
What I really wanted to have you on today to talk about was, you wrote a memoir. It's called Becoming Phoenix, a fiery memoir. I would even say it's maybe the fiery memoir. So just give me like the 30,000 foot overview to start with. What's this about? I know it's about your life, but.
Right. So between 2012 and 2017, I went through an epic number of catastrophic crises that Steve Embry would call it. I was calling it tragedies, but I'll call it crises.
Journalistic softened it up for you.
Yeah, it just, one thing, one on top of another. And there was no time to think about what was happening. It was just wake up, put one foot in front of the other, and navigate it and just hold on until the storm was over. As I was going through that, and then the years after the fallout and recovery, as people would hear different parts of my story, or if they were there in the midst of it, everybody kept saying, you have to write a book about this, or this sounds like a Hollywood movie. And the time came that I finally went to my best friend and said, okay, look, I'll do this. Like, first of all, nobody wants to lay their life out there for everybody. But
yeah, I was going to say, I would never write a memoir. No, thank you.
Yeah. But a lot of it was public already because I already had a brand through the Round Table. And so a lot of people already saw me going through it.
And we'll get to that. Put a flag in that, everybody, for now.
Yeah. But I told her, I said, I would agree to write it if I could have a writing partner, and I would fictionalize it, and I would a good versus evil spin on it. And so I met someone that fit that role. We worked on it. And after about 2 years, it was done. And when I received it and read it, there was no question. There was no way I could put that out there because that was not the story I needed to tell. So it took a couple more years, and then the time was finally right. And I sat down and I read it myself.
You finished the fictionalized version with a writing partner, and you scrapped the whole thing. Wow. That's wild. What was it about the fictionalized version that was just not hitting for you?
It wasn't, the story wasn't cohesive. There were all these things that we had made up or we'd fictionalized, or it was really what it came down to was, and I say this in my author's note, I realized I just wasn't ready. The truth of what I went through was enough. And I wasn't ready because I would have to face the pain again to write it.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to make sure
really hard to do.
Yeah, but I wanted to make sure if I'm going to do this, I'm willing to, but I want to be sure that it's written in a way that, yes, it's my story, but I don't want people to feel sorry for me. The book is not about me. The book is facing whatever kind of trials or challenges that you have, and not just surviving, but thriving. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but like when you go through some of the things like what I went through, sometimes the only control you have is your attitude. And sometimes you have to learn to let go of things you thought you wanted to hold on to, or that you needed. And there's a reason to let go of those things. And I talk about that at the end of the book.
All right, let's talk about some of the things that you lay out in the book. So when we first started talking, you told me you had written this. We were in the middle of a conversation. You had started reading from the book, and I wasn't aware that that's what was going on. And then it was like, oh, we're talking about erections? Like, what happened here? I was so confused. But that's how the book starts off. So, like, can you talk about, like, this instant you added to the beginning of the book and why you made it the first chapter?
So the prologue that you're talking about,
yes,
is
the prologue, not the first chapter.
The prologue that you're talking about is a part of the story that is the one part of the story that absolutely no one knew about. There were only 3 people in my life who knew about that. No one knew, and it's actually kind of towards. It is one of the tragedies, but it's a very pivotal moment in that journey where it seems like it is absolutely the worst, as if things could not get any worse, and it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also
we're
moment.
Definitely
it's
starting
a pivotal
in
moment.
medias res here.
Yeah.
Homer style.
Go ahead. Do you want to read it? Read the first line.
No, I do not.
Okay. All right. So it's...
Probably that's because I don't have it in front of me. But yeah, you can just tell people about it.
But it's that impactful because... Yeah. But the second thing I chose... The second reason I chose to start the prologue, start the book with that line is because... I mean, I did the research. If I'm going to write a book, how do I do this to really make an impact? And you hear the first line, and the response from everybody is... WTF, what did I just hear?
Right.
And you have to read the second line. You have to read the third line.
Yeah.
And it draws you
Yeah.
in and you're like,
Yeah.
this is crazy. This is nuts. And especially for those people who know me, they're like, what? But
So
that's
to you,
yeah.
that incident with this guy was like, this was the kind of like the catalyst for you to be like, okay, I'm going to have to do some things, make some changes kind of deal. Is that the way you look at it? Or is it more like, this is another thing I have to overcome with a positive, effective attitude?
It was a mix of emotions that day. It was a mix of, you gotta be effing kidding me. It cannot possibly get any worse, but it just did. And it was also the moment that I came up with the phrase, you can't take anything from somebody who's already lost everything. I had nothing left to lose. Everything I had to gain was my life back and my survival. And it was a very pivotal moment in the story where the Phoenix really got her wings and she started fighting for me. I started fighting for myself.
When the audiobook comes out, I will volunteer to do some dramatic readings of chapters if you wish. Prologue,
I will have a
etc.
very serious conversation with you about that, because everybody that's heard me read pieces of it, that's the very first thing they all say is like, you are recording an Audible, right?
Right.
I
do an
will,
audiobook.
and it's hard. Like I'm not as like invincible as everybody on the outside thinks I am. Like I've read and reread and edited this memoir, like who knows how many, tens of times, but there's certain parts that it's still hard for me to get through.
You were
I
still
cry.
looking at it like, you were still like looking at it and revising it when we were talking. Today,
I was.
Yeah.
And there's some parts of it that I can't get through without, I can't control myself from being there again in a certain moment. So yes, if you want to help me read it, I will have a serious conversation, because everybody wants me to do this, but I need help doing it. I need help getting through it, for sure.
Right. I'm
and
happy
I trust
to read.
you.
I
trust
enjoy
you.
reading. Well, thank you. All right, let's go back. Like you, I think you were an Air Force brat. Is that like the fair? Okay. So how did that affect you growing up?
So when I was born on an Air Force base. My dad had just left Vietnam. He'd served there for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And then he came back. He met my mom. She also was from a military family. And that's how they met. And when I was born, he got out full time and he went to the reserve. So I did not move around like other military brats did. But I had that not only from his side, but also from my mother's side. So it was very strict and regimented, and there were very defined expectations. And foundationally, the expectation was you live a life of servitude. You're the bottom of the hierarchy and you take orders and you do what you're told. And
so as a kid, you're like, this is how it is. This is how it goes.
As a kid, and when my parents were married, I mean, we were having fun. We had a great time. I have great memories. We did really fun things when we lived in Pennsylvania, where my dad's family was from. Like, I had no idea how poor we were. Like, we had food, we had a cat, we had a river, we had swings, we had family, we had cousins, we had blackberries and blackberry juice stains and bumblebee stings and, thunderstorms. Like, everything about living was fun. Everything about living was fun. And then my parents got divorced and that changed. And we got ripped from Pennsylvania and moved to Alabama. And that Southern Bible
small
Belt.
Change.
Yeah. I know it now. Like, seeing my life like this so many years later and writing this book, like I see all these things now, but like clearly I wasn't made to conform.
Well, yeah. Can we talk about that? So, like, one set of strictures is the military, but then the Deep South, not strictures necessarily, but there are certain conventions in place.
For
so,
sure.
is it like fried green tomatoes or steel magnolias? What was it like for you? growing up there?
Well, first of all, I never picked up the accent very thick, and people comment about that all the time.
You haven't.
But I lived there for 3.5 decades. But funny enough, when I was a kid and we moved there, it was the first year after my parents' divorce, I would hear these words like yonder and reckon. And even as an 8-year-old, I was like, that sounds awful. What is that? Like, I'm never going to say those words. And I don't. Like, there was just something in me that was just defiant even at 8 years old. I hated the language. And, yeah, I know, right.
Well, there goes our Southern listenership. We had a nice run.
But the funny thing is, and I now I know this, and it started happening when I would go to Legal Tech years ago, and I'd be up in New York and be in a group of people talking, whatever, right? eDiscovery, whatever. So someone would recognize, I would say a word or something, and it's just subtle enough that someone would catch it. And usually it was a man. And they'd say something, oh, where are you from? And I promise I have to start giving a disclaimer now. I would tell people, be very careful if you say that to me, because I have an alter ego. And if she recognizes that you recognize the Southern accent and that you liked it, darling, we'll talk to you like this long as we need to until I get a signature on that there contract, and we all be happy. Now, won't we, darling? Because everybody likes a little honey on the biscuits, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Right.
That's how you should do the audiobook. I'm just throwing it out there.
It just shows up.
Let's this is like another, so like dudes in legal, a lot of shitheads out there, like a lot of people who like take advantage of others, frankly. That is just the way it is. You've got, let's do this now, you've got a chapter in this book called The Assault. Do you want to talk about that?
It's public.
Okay.
Like NPR level public, so
yeah,
let's go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Okay. So like what happened? And if there's anything where you're like, hey, go out and read the book, just tell me and we'll move on to something else.
It's okay. It's public. So in 2016, by 2016, my mom had already passed away, and I was finally finished with my breast cancer journey. I had the Round Table as a business, and I had shut it down, and I had been trying to find a full-time job to go back to work, thinking this stuff was done, and I just wanted to move on with my life. And finding a full-time job proved impossible. Because I learned, that was the first time I learned that once you're an entrepreneur, and it doesn't matter why.
Right. You never want to work for anybody again.
No one wants to. Employers won't hire entrepreneurs. They think you're rogue and you have no rules, you have no boundaries. And well, I mean, we could talk about that on another show. But anyway, I couldn't find a full-time job. So it became pretty obvious. And people from the Round Table kept staying in touch. And even though I wasn't doing it, they kept inviting me to speaking engagements or to events or, whatever it was. So, and finally a friend came to me and he's like, look, I've got a little extra money sitting over here that I'm not using. Let's relaunch it. And I was like, okay. So we did. And so
you ran this like eDiscovery Round Table. We can get into that after this, but go ahead.
Yeah. So we put about 10 months into relaunching this. Okay, rebuilding it, because it takes time to build a business before you're ready to go out there and start trying to make money from it. So we're right at the tail end, and we're getting ready to relaunch. I've got a program planned in I think April of 2016, and it's February of 2016, and it was a Tuesday night in February, and I lived in downtown Birmingham at the time, and I decided to take a break at this local place called Paramount, where all the locals, downtowners, and business people hung out after hours. And they had these amazing chicken wings. They were dry rubbed with fresh rosemary and lemon rind, and they were baked in their wood oven stove. It was so
Sounds
good.
delightful.
They were amazing. Yeah. So I wanted some chicken wings. I go down to the restaurant bar, and it's packed. And I look on one side of the bar and the front of the bar for an open seat. And I picked the seat at the front of the bar in the middle because it was the most well lit and it was surrounded by people. And as I was telling this story to the Messing brothers, they both were like, it never occurred to me as a man to actually take time to pick the safest place for me to sit.
Right. I was just going to say that. That's not even consideration for me.
Ask any woman. Every single one of us
makes
do
sense.
it. Like we're breathing oxygen. It's just normal for us. So I picked the seat in front and I sat down, ordered my chicken wings, a vodka cranberry, and this man on the right side of me starts talking to me. And I've got blinders on like I always do. And, I short answers, whatever. And he keeps on. He won't leave me alone. And finally, he tells me his name. And I was like, oh, you're so-and-so from this law firm. And it's a very prominent plaintiff's firm in downtown Birmingham.
So
the
now
whole
you're
building got their
thinking,
name on the building.
Maybe I could get a gig here.
Not really. It wasn't even that. It was just one of their associates had been a speaker for the round table. But as soon as when I said my name, he's like, oh, you're that chick that does the eDiscovery CLEs. And I was like, so in that moment, for me, I'm a woman. For me, it immediately becomes a business meeting. I can't be social. So for me, it's business. And I have to put the professional side on, right? Because how I carry myself reflects. I've got a brand.
Right. And I think it's easier for guys to kind of mix that up a little bit.
And so again, I'm not trying to drag the story out. I'm not responding to him. So he forces me to respond by running his hand very quickly up my leg and grabbing my vagina.
And you've literally just met this person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I ripped his hand off of me, and with as much strength as I could, I was directing just to him. I wasn't loud, but I was very firm. Don't do that. You have no right. I don't like that. And he said, oh, you liked it and you know it. And he did it again. It was so fast, Jared. And I was paralyzed. And, I've taught in the second time around, I go through the same thing, and he leans into me. He gets within inches of my nose and he growls at me. I can touch you any way I want to.
Wow.
And I remember
this is happening in a public place.
Mm-hmm. And it's packed, it's crowded, and it's well lit. And I remember processing the thought, he was much older. He was overweight. I could tell he'd had a few, and it was a concrete floor, and we're sitting at the bar stools. And I processed the thought, I probably have enough strength in me to push him off the chair.
Yeah.
And if I do this, he'll crack his head. It could kill him. And then I thought to myself, oh my God, I have it in me to take the life of another human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is not how I handled it.
But still, this gets dark very quickly, obviously.
And when I've told this, most people are supportive, 99% of people. There's been a couple, and there were women, and they're chastised me and like, well, why didn't you handle it this way? And why didn't you do this? And why didn't you just punch him? Are you kidding me? If you've ever been through that, it doesn't matter how strong you think you are or anybody else does. Jared, I was paralyzed.
Oh, sure.
Not even paralyzed in fear, but just paralyzed in shock. You don't know how to respond. You cannot will your body and your mind to respond to protect yourself in a situation like this.
Yeah. I think a lot of this like Harvey Weinstein, Donald Trump bullshit happens in legal, and most of it is like no one talks about it. So I know this is like really difficult to talk about, but I appreciate you doing it and writing about it, because hopefully it'll give other people the courage to speak up about it, because it happens all the time in the legal industry, all the time. Hopefully less so now, but it's a regular occurrence.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for giving me a safe place to talk about it. Thank you to your audience for listening to this story. You do need to read the book. But years later, there was another incident at Legal Week, and the Messing, Rocky and Jimmy Messing, they wrote about it. And so you can go look that up.
And that was a big deal like a few years ago, I think, right?
Right. And I always knew that, of course, this is years after I had recovered from everything, but I always knew that at some point it would come time for me to go public about the assault, because I knew it would help other people. And it could be part of a movement that it's not just about awareness, it's about making this stop. Yeah. And so I did end up NPR ended up covering what the Messing brothers were involved in, what they saw happened. And NPR ended up doing a 3-article series on it. And they did do a story about what I'd been through. Mine was part of that series.
Now, I don't believe you were involved personally with the Legal Week issue.
No.
Right?
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Just so people know. So this happens at conferences. Mm-hmm. This happens inside of law offices regularly. Mm-hmm. And it's horseshit, and it needs to stop. Guys can control themselves far better. There's no excuse for that kind of behavior.
There's no excuse. And it doesn't necessarily need to be gender specific. Yes, statistically, it's more men doing this to women, but it can be opposite.
By a large margin, which is why I'm speaking mostly to men here, but go ahead.
Right. But when all of that was happening with the Messing brothers and the conversation on LinkedIn started, like, I kept feeling I need to say something, but I didn't want what I had to say to get lost in the mix of LinkedIn messages and comments. So I reached out to them, and I reached out to Kat Casey too. I'll talk to her first because I felt like
she's coming on the show.
I knew
soon.
Yeah. I knew it was time for me to do this, but I wanted to make sure I surrounded myself with that small group, But I told them, what I'm seeing is a lot of talk about awareness, but I'm not seeing anything about someone who actually held their assailant accountable and what that looked like to go through that and what life looks like on the other side. Because that's the biggest reason that people don't go through it. They're terrified. And I certainly was, but I knew that I was in a position because of my brand. I had to do something.
Yeah.
And I was afraid it would cost me my career.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that people in position of power are protected. I am hopeful that younger generations are more respectful of others than that. So good on you for doing that and speaking out about it seriously. You should be proud of yourself. A couple other things I want to ask you about. You also talk in the book about this is not exactly quite the same thing we were talking about, but when you you've had a lot of men in your life tell you you're intimidating. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I don't know, I'm not intimidated by people, men or women. It's just I can't remember someone I've been intimidated by since I was a child, basically. But what is the deal with that? Is that a game? Is that serious? What are these guys trying to achieve?
I think a lot of it can be cultural.
Okay.
I think a lot of it can be age related, generational.
Oh.
I see more of a balance in the generations behind you and me, more of a balance between the sexes. But I think I get a lot of what?
I don't know if we're in the same generation. I thought I was in the silent generation. I'm 87 years old. All right,
that changes the nature of the subject that everybody in politics should retire at 65, and we need to be done with that. We need a new generation in leadership. But anyway, that's another conversation.
Get the fuck out. Okay,
right. Be done with it. No, I think it's a lot of it may have been cultural, but there are. I don't know, Jared. I don't have a good reason. I don't know where it's coming from, but it started when I got a phone call in my 30s from a man in the singles group at church, randomly, without being prompted. And he called and he's like, "Do you know why no one wants to date you?" And I was like, okay.
That's fucked up. I don't get that. That is this whole incel thing, which I don't understand at all. That's kind of an incel angle. I feel one of my biggest focus points is trying to not let my son become an incel Nazi. That is if I achieve that, I will have succeeded in life. Let's not be Charlie Kirk or some shithead like that.
But Jared, I'm turning 53 on August 19th, and the day the book is going out, and I heard this 1 month ago at my own apartment complex at the pool by the husband of one of the people in my acquaintance group here. And a group of us are talking. There's a younger man there, and there's a bunch of us there. And he looks at me and he's like, Melissa, you're just too smart. You need to dial it down. Like, I've been hearing this shit for 30 years. That I'm too smart. I'm intimidating. Like, whatever it is, like, I do get excited about it, and it hurts, but it's coming from people who are insecure, unfortunately.
Themselves.
And people who, they're insecure with something in themselves. And whether it's me or somebody else, they see something, anybody who's attacking another person, they're projecting a wound that they have that they're not willing to face or deal with themselves. That's really where it's coming from.
A lot of that going around right now. Stop negging people. It's annoying. It doesn't work as a guy.
Just be nice. Okay. It's so much easier.
Fucking A. Okay, let's do some legal stuff because the podcast is called Legal Late Night, not my random thoughts late night. Although sometimes it is. Let's talk about this ESI Round Table.
Okay.
That you did, this eDiscovery thing.
Let's talk about it.
Because you built like this kind of like viral group, essentially. Mm-hmm. How did you do that, and how did it end?
So I had, back in 2008, I was in legal tech sales in Alabama, and I was at a defense lawyers conference in Georgia, and it was small. It was in the fall, and a question. Alabama had put their rules committee together. They not put the rules together, but they had a committee discussing it. And so I was at this conference, and the last session was a panel of judges, state court judges. And I was sitting in a room full of 60 lawyers. I was sitting in the back with a guy named Dudley Motlow. And a question came up about cost sharing with the plaintiff side. And no one knew how to answer. Like, it got crickets. Like, the room was silent. Dudley leans over and he's like, "Hey, Rogo, you need to say something." And I was like, I'm in sales, like, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm all these excuses, right? And I'm a woman,
I'm in
right?
Sales.
I'm a woman. I'm not supposed to because I'm intimidating. I'm too smart, right?
You're an intimidating woman, correct?
Yeah. So anyway, he encourages me. So I stand up and I raise my hand. I'm all the way in the back. And Judge Scott Vowell, who is presiding judge of Jefferson County, calls on me. And Judge Vowell, Your Honor, thank you so much. My name is Melissa Rogozinski, and yada, yada. I'm not trying to sell anything, but I think I haven't answered your question. And he's like, "Melissa, if you can answer this question, you sell anything you want to, and I've got your back." So,
but it's funny that you felt like you had to deliver those qualifiers before you even said anything. That's unfortunate.
So I answered this question, and that was it. And the conference was over. And so I go back to the booth to man the booth, and I get swarmed by lawyers and judges. And Judge Vowell, he's about 6'1", 2 or something like that. Tall, slender, just, he has a presence, just a total gentleman, right? So it's like the Red Sea just parted. Like, he just glides through this group surrounding me, and he extends his hand and he shakes my hand, and he said, "I'd love to talk to you more about this." So I told him, I said, "Here's what I'm seeing from, the seat that I have in the industry. I used to be a paralegal. Now I'm in sales. Here's the conversations we're having. Here's what I'm seeing. This is what the company I work for does. But we need resources in Alabama because no one's coming to Alabama to help us. They're in New York, Chicago, wherever. And, but here's the challenges I have with a competitor who does court reporting, because we do that too. All right. Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, "Melissa, you put a group together and let them know I'm involved, and I will help you educate Birmingham." And so a year later, I called him up and I was like, "Hey, do you remember this conversation?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "All right, well, it's time." And he said, "All right, I'm going to call this person, this person." He lists 4 people. And I'm like, "Great, I'll call these 4 people." We had breakfast in November of 2009. We're sitting at this round table.
Over here, setting up the eDiscovery adventures.
It was, and we're sitting at this round table. Everybody has their breakfast, their coffee. We're in a private dining room. And he looks at me from across the table. He's like, "Okay, Rogo, tell him your great idea." And I'm sitting there for a moment. I'm thinking.
And you're like, "What now?"
I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I'm a secretary. I'm a paralegal. Like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. Like, I'm not a leader. And that's how the round table was born. And as soon as I told them the idea, they all started talking. They were from every single position within the legal industry you could imagine. And they all started talking. They all started coming up with the problem. They all started coming up with solutions. And then an hour and a half later, he looks at me. He's like, "Okay, what's next?" And that's when I realized I'm being asked to lead. and I have a decision to make. And if I make the right decision, I get an opportunity to carve out a path that absolutely doesn't exist, but needs to. And so
you become the organizing principle behind this like group of eDiscovery experts, basically. And it got pretty big, right?
Yeah, it became a very community collaborative event. And even though I worked for a vendor, I made sure there was never a sales pitch. It was all about the knowledge and the education. But I had been the paralegal first. I wasn't a salesperson first. I'd been a paralegal first.
Yeah,
and
so the reps.
My passion has always been, my commitment has always been to the law firm and what's in the best interest of the lawyers, right? And so we did this, and we held our first program in February of 2010. And we ended up having like 180 people register. It was wild. It was crazy, and it got massive. We had to do a second program of the same thing because we had 50 people. We had to tell, we don't have seats for you. We have to hold another program. The CEO from the company that I worked for came down for it. It was a wild success. And so we did this for a couple years. And then when my mom got sick, each one of them that had helped me start it, they sat me down and they said, you've gotten something here. And if you want to turn this into a business, we'll help you. And so that seemed like a good idea, even though I'd never had a business before. I didn't know a thing about doing that. But my mom was sick. And it should
not be a blocker that you never had a business before. Everybody overcomes it.
There was no time to think about it. But I had all the support I needed.
Did the RPC strategies thing grow from that, essentially?
It did. Many years later, the Round Table grew. Eventually, over time, it grew to 9 cities and over 300 programs before I just stopped counting. I just lost count.
That's wild, yeah.
I was nominated.
People fucking love eDiscovery.
Yeah. I was nominated for eDiscovery Person of the Year. I received an award from the Alabama. Yeah. I was nominated in 2016 for the ASED's eDiscovery Person of the Year. The Alabama State Bar gave me an award as top 30 best practice management tips, and they made the Round Table part of their roadshow in 2014. And then, years later, I started getting phone calls from law firms and legal tech vendors to help me do for my company what you did for the Round Table, and that was just my DIY marketing. So RPC Strategies became my marketing and sales consulting firm.
Look at this. Now we're full circle to my first question. Thank you for doing this. I know this was very difficult to do at points, so I appreciate it. There's a bunch of stuff we didn't cover that's in the book. I just wanted to shit on some of these incel fucks for half an hour or so. If people want to read like the full publication, like where can they get it? How can people find Becoming Phoenix, a Fiery Memoir? That is before I do the audio version and that becomes available.
So you can download the ebook or the paperback on Amazon. It was published as of August 19th, 2026, which is also my birthday.
Excellent. Will you stick around for one last segment, Melissa?
Of course. Always.
It promises to be less intense than the prior section.
I've survived. Right. If I can survive that, I can survive you, Jared. Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. We'll be right back, everybody.
All right.
Welcome to the Counter Program. It's a podcast within a podcast. This is a conversational space where we can address usually unrelated topics that I want to explore at a greater depth with my guests. Expect no rhyme and very little reason. We got Rogo coming back. How you doing?
I'm ready for this. I prepped. I researched.
You tried to cheat. I just want everyone to know.
That's not a cheat. I was researching. I was trained to research by you lawyers.
You asked AI what I was going to talk about. And I
did.
have terrible news for you. The AI was very wrong. Although I feel like it's kind of obvious in retrospect. All right, let me run it down here for you. I want to dive deeper into the world of life stories with a trivia game I'm going to call Autobiographical, in which I will ask you questions about historical memoirs while also providing you multiple choice selections of potential answers for each question, only one of which is correct. You're already Googling, aren't you? That's not fair.
Geminiing this shit since Gemini lied and misled me. All right.
I feel like this was an easy one. You wrote a memoir. I'm going to ask you about memoirs. Your mission Should you choose to accept it, is to select the right answer for each question. I have 6 questions for you. Are you ready, Rogo?
Do I have a choice?
No.
I have a choice over my attitude.
You do. Oh, look at that. A way to pull it back to the book.
No.
Amazing. Okay. Question 1.
Okay.
Which 4th century North African bishop wrote a foundational spiritual biography that detailed his struggles with lust and famously outlined a motiveless theft of pears when he was a teenager? This is the kind of shit that 4th century North African bishops were thinking about. Was it Rules by St. Benedict, Confessions by St. Augustine, or Meditations by St. Marcus? Rules, Benedict, Confessions, Augustine, Meditations, Marcus. What do you think? See if we can get off to a hot start here, or a fiery start.
I can't even type that fast to Ask Gemini anymore, so I can cheat.
Good.
Confessions.
Correct. You don't fucking need Gemini. The
I'm not a
famous
real
Confessions
blonde.
by St. Augustine. All right, we're off to a good start. We're
You
1
caught
for
that.
1. Okay. Okay. Yes, you've got purple in your hair today.
I do.
Which I did not
See?
notice because I don't
Right,
notice
there
anything.
it is.
This is why you got to watch the podcast on video. Confessions by St. Augustine. He was a real perv, frankly. When he was in college, this is probably the best part of the autobiography. He used to pray to God, grant me chastity and continence, but not yet. Pretty good prayer. I feel like I should incorporate that. Except for the continent part. I would like to remain continent in the current
I don't know. It's not
parlance,
like
but
there's a section in my book just go read the book because there's a parallel there. That's all I'll say about that.
That's my new prayer. All right.
Okay. Next. Moving on.
By the book. Question 2. Which Civil War general wrote a celebrated 2-volume personal narrative in 1885 while dying of throat cancer in order to ensure his family's financial security? This is a memoir that I have read in totality. Is it Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, or Stonewall Jackson? Let's see if Google can provide you an answer for this. I don't know if I can
I've
give you
got the
credit
answer.
if you're using Google. I think we might have to throw these results
What are my
out. Go
options
ahead.
again?
What's the answer?
What are my options again?
Robert
Give me
E.
my
Lee,
options again. Okay.
U.S. Grant, or Stonewall Jackson?
Ulysses S. Grant. Is that how you say it?
Oh, yeah. Is that what Google
S. Grant?
Gemini told you?
Yes.
Ulysses S. Grant.
Yes.
You're our first cheater in the game. I suppose this is bound to happen at some
That's
point.
absolutely not true. I guarantee you there's other people that have cheated. That's absolutely not true.
U.S. Grant, famously corrupt president, embroiled in many, many scandals. He lost his life savings in a Ponzi scheme in 1884. And so he was going to write a book about his life. And there was he was offered a 10% royalty commission by a publishing house. And friend of the pod, Mark Twain, came in and said, I'll give you 70%, which set up his family for many, many years because he made $200,000 in royalty checks,
Wow.
which amounts to $7 million today.
Jared, would you
How
like to
about
pay
that?
me for my memoir? Let's find someone.
We'll do that. We'll do the royalty arrangement that Mark Twain got for Ulysses S. Grant. Super interesting story, though. And the memoir is actually not bad. It's pretty good. All right. Let's move to question 3. Now I got to try to do really complicated questions so that you can't Google them. Question 3. Published anonymously in 1887, this odd memoir tells an erotic, taboo-filled story written from the perspective of an unusual, parasitic protagonist. But which one? Was this called The Autobiography of a Mosquito? The Autobiography of Lice? The Autobiography of a Flea? Is this a autobiography written from the perspective of a mosquito, lice, or a flea from 1887? Melissa
about a
staring
flea?
intently at Google
about a
Gemini.
flea?
The flea is correct.
No, I didn't Gemini
The flea
that.
is correct.
No.
Okay.
Wow.
Impressive.
How about that?
This is a.
I mean, what are the
this was a
odds
very
that every answer is B?
Not good.
No,
Anyway,
okay. All right.
The Flea's Eye View autobiography was very controversial at the time. Actually written by a lawyer, it turned out, although it was anonymously published. So how about that? And then it was turned into a pornographic film in 1976. And here we are, of the same name, if you want to watch that. Question 4.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this is a little bit, we're going to go on a little bit of a down note here, but I thought this was interesting. Written entirely via eye blinks following a massive stroke, Jean-Dominique Bauby's 1997 memoir details his life inside a state known as what medical condition? Did this person write their autobiography with catatonic displacement, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, or locked-in syndrome? Now, as you think, perhaps research, this person only had a functioning left eyelid, and so they wrote this book by blinking the left eyelid, and someone would hold up alphabet patterns, and they went letter by letter to write an entire autobiography. Super interesting story.
What are the options again? That's fascinating. That's worthy
catatonic displacement, ALS or Lou Gehrig syndrome, or locked-in syndrome.
I'm not going to go with the obvious. I'll choose something random. How about locked-in syndrome?
Correct.
Oh wow!
We're 4
no
for
kidding.
4.
How about that?
What do you think the obvious one would have been? ALS.
ALS. Yeah.
Locked-in syndrome is pretty bad. Basically, like your body shuts down and your mind is still active, like kind of like an extreme version of ALS with less movement. This guy was only 43 years old. He had a massive stroke, and this if people are interested, the name of the book is "The Diving Bell and the Butterfly," where his body is the diving bell and his paralyzed body, and the butterfly is his mind, which goes on frequent tangents. It was also made into a movie as well.
That is worthy of being looked up and everybody reading something like that. I mean, someone that can do something like that, like they should be recognized and honored for something like that.
The level of intensity and involved in that is impressive. Okay, number 5. Wow. You're 4 for 4.
Okay.
I might have to put an asterisk on this one because you did look up the second one using Google Gemini.
I'm at least passing. I'm not failing. So even if you pull the one from me, I've passed. So, which is much better than the last time I did this.
And we've never had a perfect score ever, cheating or not. So this could be like a very fiery episode of the show with maybe the first perfect score.
That was awesome. Thanks for the plug.
Thank you. Question 5. Which 1971 Faux diary claimed to be a real-life account of teenage descent into drug addiction, but was actually authored by Beatrice Sparks as a fictional account? Was it The Basketball Diaries, Go Ask Alice, or Smack? The Basketball Diaries, Go Ask Alice, or Smack, the 1971 fictional memoir about teenage drug use.
Go Ask Alice.
Correct. We're 5 for 5.
Really? Wow, that's awesome. I think you should give me the 5 for 5 just so you finally have someone that got 100%.
I know. I feel like I should. We need to kill the drama behind that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what made you think of that as the answer? I'm just interested to know.
I think I went with answers that weren't the obvious. Because Smack, that sounds like something related to drugs.
Yes.
But again, go back and read my memoir because I very specifically say, not that I've ever done drugs, because I haven't.
Ever?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh, that's a lie.
Moving on. So Alex is the protagonist of the book, and she gets into some bad shit. But what's interesting is people didn't know this was fake for years. And it was used aggressively during Reagan's war on drugs to convince people off of using drugs. And then people found out like the story was totally invented by this therapist. All right. Wow, we're learning a lot today, everyone.
Because I hijacked your podcast when I said, I have done drugs. And so I need to clarify this because you skimmed right over it and I need to put my disclaimer out there.
Do you want to know if yes, I have dabbled.
Okay.
Go on.
All right. Okay, so a friend of mine would melt his butter for his cookies down with marijuana. And he would tell me by the
it's not even that bad.
No, but oh my God, those were the best cookies in the whole world, Jared. They were chocolate chip and like, I remember, and he would come down, I would be building business or working on a Sunday at 8:00 and he'd come down to the conference room at the apartment where we were and he would bring me a cookie and he would, look, you're a lightweight, so you're only allowed to have 1/4 of this, okay? 1/4 at a time. And so I finally, and they actually would just sit in my refrigerator because it's just really not my thing. But every now and then I would. And anyway, I had this whole routine. Like I would sleep in the living room, which was next to the kitchen, and I would set out my snacks, my peanut butter, my apple, my cheese, my water, because I knew this was coming, right? And I would watch the clock. And about 2 hours into this, I would start laughing hysterically at absolutely nothing and get up and eat all my snacks. And I woke up one morning and an entire jar of brand new peanut butter had been demolished. It was all gone. So that's the best it gets for me.
Should maybe drink half bottle of cough medicine or take some nutmeg. Not that I recommend any of those things. Question 6.
Moving on.
When Renaissance, this is the hardest question of all. I wish you luck. This is it for the perfect score. First ever perfect score. Drum roll, please. Which Renaissance goldsmith's 16th century autobiography scandalized readers with raw, brash accounts of his real life as an artist, lover, and yes, murderer? Was it, yes, this is all true. Was it Benvenuto Cellini, Giorgio Vasari, or Filippo Brunelleschi? Cellini, Vasari, or Brunelleschi? And unless
Cellini.
you know Renaissance goldsmiths, correct. We did it. Evan, we did it. We had a perfect score.
That's amazing.
And you were nervous.
Wow.
All right, give me the logic behind it.
Because none of the answers
That was a really hard question.
Choice A. Most of the answers were choice B, and then I chose C, and then but none of them were A, so I went with A. That's it.
Wow. This was an autobiography that was written by an actual goldsmith of some note in Italy, when he was in his 50s, and it was never meant to be published. It was a lost manuscript, but it was found by a publisher in 1728 who released it, and it is batshit crazy. This guy was an actual murderer who would premeditate murders. He believed he conjured up devils in the Roman Colosseum. Just wild shit. And probably this is maybe one of the best reviews of an autobiography ever written. Perhaps you can only hope to get one this good. Other goldsmiths have done finer work, but Cellini is the author of the most delightful autobiography ever written. Ever. Not bad. He was only an okay goldsmith, though. Thank you for your participation. How did we do? The first perfect score ever. I'm fucking done. We're done. No more podcast. It's the last episode.
It's worth all the late nights, right?
All the legal late nights. Correct.
All of them.
Well, thank you for coming on. We had a blast. Thanks to our guest, Melissa Rogozinski, who is the CEO of RPC Strategies, LLC. To learn more about Melissa and her work, visit rpcgrowthstrategies.com. That's rpcgrowthstrategies.com. Check it out. Melissa's book, Becoming Phoenix, a Fiery Memoir, is also available for purchase now. Pick up your copy today. Now, because I'll always be a 90s kid who always rewound his videotapes before returning them to Blockbuster, but whose true passion is burning CDs for anyone who would listen, I'm now just doing the modern version of that, which is creating Spotify playlists for every podcast episode that I record, where the songs are tangentially related to an episode topic. For this week's playlist, we've put together our own musical memoirs of sorts. It's biographical songs. Although every songwriter includes autobiographical bits into their compositions, we've narrowed it down a bit in order to examine tracks that are retrospectives of real or imagined persons' lives. And it's brought to us by The Game of Life and Hasbro. Thank you, Hasbro. For nothing! Hasbro hasn't really sponsored anything. I suppose that's the real game of life, folks. Join us next time as I continue to build corporate value.